Some years ago, I was visiting a clothing design house in Milan. Over an espresso, the company's CEO confided in me his worries about having to rely so heavily on China for sourcing fabrics and finished garments. "We know the risks," he said wearily. "But the prices in China are just too good to ignore." That conversation came back to me recently as reports emerged that European companies across many industries are accelerating efforts to reduce their sourcing dependence on China. It seems the old risks have become too great to easily ignore any longer. After decades of ever-deepening commercial ties, a great unraveling, or unspooling, is underway between Europe and the world's mega-exporter of manufactured goods. The forces propelling this shift have been building for years: geopolitical tensions, human rights issues, China's own push for self-reliance. But the shock of the pandemic and the debilitating supply chain disruptions it brought seem to have concentrated corporate minds wonderfully. The big trend right now is for companies to reduce their dependence on China, Richard Loeb, CEO of the Belgian sourcing firm Dragon Sourcing, told reporters. Europe, he said, is now catching up to the United States, which has aggressively sought to decouple from trade with China under the Trump and Biden administrations. Unlike the U.S. approach of blanket tariffs and restrictions, however, the European effort appears more targeted, focused on specific industries and product categories where companies feel an unhealthy over-reliance has developed on Chinese suppliers. Retail, apparel, toys, electronics, these are areas where Loeb estimates some large European firms source a staggering 80 to 90% of goods from China. William Fung, deputy chair of the global sourcing giant Li & Fung, describes companies telling him bluntly, "I don't care what you do, just get me to 30% outside of China." Some have gone even farther, demanding a complete China exit. "It's a global push," Fung says, born of a hard-earned wisdom you can't afford to be optimal and wrong. To be sure, companies aren't fleeing China en masse. Its immense production machine remains unmatched for many complex goods, as does its price competitiveness, especially as U.S. tariffs have pushed some global buyers to shift more orders to Chinese factories. Analysts expect the great unspooling to be gradual, hitting some Chinese factories and regions harder than others. But make no mistake, a momentous rerouting of global supply chains is underway, with Europe now joining the journey. Naveen Jha, a textile sourcer in eastern China, says he's already seeing European buyers opt for higher costs and longer lead times in India, Bangladesh and Vietnam rather than continuing overexposure to the Middle Kingdom. The reasons run deeper than economics or politics. They speak to an almost spiritual crisis of confidence in the old mercantilist compact between nations. For decades, Western companies outsourced production to China in the rational pursuit of profit, reckoning the geopolitical risks were worth it for access to the world's cheapest labor pool. But gradually, those calculations have soured as China's authoritarian capitalist model has curdled into something less friendly, predictable, or stable. Non-food retail is very, very dependent on China, Loeb laments. Those types of companies in Europe are pushing hard to look for alternatives. A similar rethink is underway in chemicals, pharmaceuticals, electronics. Even corporations with a generally benign view of China feel compelled by fiduciary duty to spread their bets across more safe harbors. It wouldn't surprise me if history judges this era as the end of a 40-year cycle of frenzied globalization, one that made the world richer in goods and far more economically interdependent. As with so much in our fractious times, the unspooling reflects new stresses and suspicions, an erosion of the trust and confidence that made it all work in the first place. China will surely remain a production behemoth for decades to come. But already we glimpse the next phase taking shape: a more fractured global economy with regional spheres of influence and shorter, more diversified supply arteries less susceptible to systemic disruption. It's a model that sacrifices some economic efficiency for greater resilience. Perhaps not optimal, but less horribly wrong when the next shock inevitably comes.